Hi, I'm Professor Ruth McPhail from the Department of Employment Relations and Human Resources, and I'm part of the Griffith Business School teaching team. And I'm going to talk to you about work and professional identity. So what is professional identity? And what are some of the strategies you need to know to develop it? What's the framework that you can use to construct that identity? What's the role of personality and individual differences? And how do we look at the compass for success to find the work that you love through aligning your values and your chosen profession? So we're going to look at values, personality traits, and align them to what you want to do in the future. So what is professional identity? Well, here's a couple of concepts. One is that it's your professional self-concept based on attributes, beliefs, values, motives, and experiences. This is a very old concept from 1978, but one that really shaped the way academic literature looked at professional identity was the work of Shine. And as we moved on, we started to see it develop into a complex, personal, and shaped by contextual factors and changed over time. So we see there that it becomes more complex. Your professional identity, therefore, is unique and developing through your work, and your professional identity is all about knowing who you are, what your personality is, what your values are, your personal goals, and what experience you have to bring to the table. So how do you develop professional identity? Well, there's 6 factors according to this particular study, and that is we can start with role models through social experience. So experiences with family, friends, at school and in the workplace. Who were your role models and what did they give you in terms of developing your professional identity? I know for me, for example, I was very motivated in my first job by a teacher at school, and I wanted to be very much like that teacher at school, and I went through and became a high school teacher in my first career. So that's one way that a role model might influence you, or through your social experience. You might, for example, come from a very difficult background, and that might spur you on to be motivated to look at working in social services or a social justice agenda. So these things can impact on your social identity. What's your educational experience? Now that can be school, it can be at home, and how is that going to impact on what you think your capabilities are or your professional identity is? And then what's the congruence between the profession and you? Now what that means is how similar are you? So do you have the same values and beliefs? And earlier I talked to you about how an organisation's values very rarely change. So you must make sure that their values align with your values, as was the case for me when I came to Griffith. They had a very strong social justice agenda, and so did I. So it was a very good partnership in that regard. Demographic characteristics, so what gender, geographical proximity, and what are your parents' professions can also have an impact on your professional identity. So we know, for example, students who have got generations of higher education graduates in their family often continue with that trend, which is why we are so keen to support our first in family students that come to Griffith, who are the first people in their families to go to higher education. We're so proud of them, and we know that they do graduate with the same results, and we know that that will change their lives, their children's lives, and the lives of their children because of this demographic characteristic of how it impresses upon your professional identity. There's also your professional image. So what's the prestige and financial security that you might be seeking? And we know there are different status levels. So between, for example, a doctor and a cleaner, there are different statuses. So what is the prestige, but also what financial security do those different roles bring you? That said, in recent times, of course, we've seen a big increase in the importance of things like cleanliness and hygiene. So these things can shift and change depending on what's happening in the environment. Professional experience, so during or prior your study, will also give you some impact of your professional identity. So how do you do it? How do you develop it? Well, this is a professional identity framework, and really what we're looking at here is what are some of the practical strategies? So take some time to look at these strategies and think about how you might be able to apply them. We also then think about what is your employment relations or human resources professional identity? So as a human resource expert or as an employment relations expert, what might your professional identity look like? As well as we look at how do we construct it. And that is therefore from the centre of it. Take some time to have a look at this model from Shaw and Bailey to think about how you're going to be constructing your professional identity using this framework. There are also personality and individual differences in characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaviour. Now, personality tests might form a part of a selection process, and it might be used with other selection methods, for example, resumes and the usual kind of interviews, references, and performance ability measures. So types of personality tests include things like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator and the 5-factor model, or the Big 5 personality test. I'd encourage you to get out there, have a look at least one of these tests and apply it so that you can get a bit of an idea about your personality and individual differences. Some of you may have been well and truly exposed to these, but others may not be so exposed to these. And one organisation I worked for previously, for example, used the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and everybody knew what their personality type was. So for me, I'm an INTJ, and that might sound like something from outer space, but if you look into the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, you might be interested to find out what personality type you are. And it was really interesting because we were able to see how we had different strengths and abilities and how they were able to be brought together in teams to work in more effective and efficient ways. Now, the compass to success comes from a TEDx talk from 2014, and it was really based around deciding that there were these different points on the compass that you might be able to use to decide what your passion was. So starting with your unique skills, your personal and professional knowledge, your skills, attitudes, and attributes, otherwise known as the KSAA, right? So knowledge, skills, ability, and attributes. Also understanding very clearly what your values are. So what's your broad preference that governs behaviours both personally and professionally. And I'll give you an example of that from my own experience as well. I used to work for a while in hotels, and I was with one hotel chain that was very collaborative. It was very based on valuing the employee. If you looked after the employee, they would look after the customer. But I also knew very much as an HR person of the hotel down the road that really didn't have that organisational culture. I know which one I preferred, and I also know from my employees who sometimes left and often came back. Experiences are things like your activities, your processes that you've engaged in. So you can take these 3 points of the compass to decide how you're going to get across to your success. So professional identity is based on beliefs, values, attitudes, and experience that may change over time. Your professional identity is developed through factors such as demographic attributes, education and social experience, as well as the role models that you've had around you, that you have around you currently and that you'll find in the future. And being able to identify your personality strengths and weaknesses is important to developing your professional identity and finding the work that you love. Here's some more references for you to have a look at. Look forward to seeing you soon.